Hey, good morning, everyone. Good morning. So nice to see so many people here today, and there are at least 100 people online. So it's been a marvelous turnout. I'm Lee Pelton, President and CEO of the Boston Foundation, and I want to warmly welcome everyone here in person and the many others who are joining us online for this very important gathering. Last May, many of you stood in this room and sounded the alarm. You spoke about the early impacts of federal policies on your organizations, on your staff, on your communities, and on the values that anchor your work. The fact that we are gathered again in such numbers tells us two things, at least two things. First is the uncertainty and disruption have not eased, and second, happily, your resolve has not weakened. You continue to show up, you continue to lead, and you continue to serve. And convenings like this matters. It especially matters at a time when we are living with a federal government that is mean-spirited, imperialistic, and sometimes unlawful, led by an American president who would be king, to coin a phrase. And at a time when division feels louder than dialogue, when isolation threatens solidarity, and coming together is not just symbolic. Because it is, we all know, it is strategic, it is sustaining, and it reminds us that none of this work can be done alone. And in this room and online, there are leaders representing hundreds of organizations across Massachusetts. You feed families, you house neighbors, you advance research and preserve culture, and organize communities and educate young people. You provide health care, create art, and protect important and signal civil rights. You are indeed the infrastructure of care, not only care, but of possibility across the Commonwealth. And the data that you will hear today probably will not surprise you. You live it every day. But in a moment when facts are contested and truth itself can feel under siege, it is essential that we take the time to document what is happening and speak clearly and forcefully. What many of you are experiencing is not episodic, it is intentional and targeted, and it calls for a sustained, as you know, a sustained and collective action. Last May, I let you know that the Boston Foundation is committed to meeting this moment in partnership with all of you in this room. And we've sought to do so by leveraging our role as a researcher, as a convener, as a funder, an advocate, and maybe most important, as a partner with you. So through our Meeting the Moment Sustaining Families initiatives, we have worked to address government-induced hunger and instability. And by the way, note I didn't use that awful phrase, food insecurity. There's no such thing as food insecurity. There is hunger. And that is what we're talking about. And that is what our neighbors are experiencing. Their families, their children, hunger with the cuts in SNAP benefits. And since launching in August with an initial $2 million from the Boston Foundation, we have raised and catalyzed more than $8 million, I think now, to support individuals and families who have had their SNAP benefits reduced or curtailed or cut off. That includes $1.4 million in direct grants from our donor advised fund community to food-related nonprofits and $500,000 in partnership with the city of Boston. I was very pleased that the city decided to be part of this partnership with us. This effort has focused on delivering immediate relief protecting essential systems, and trying to reimagine what a more resilient safety net could look like, not for the short term, but for the long term. We're advancing now a new strategy, meeting the moments, supporting our immigrant neighbors, and this effort has three prongs. First, we are making immediate grants to organizations defending immigrant rights and due process. And second, we will soon launch a new round of grants totaling about $1.5 million distributed through a community-led process to ensure flexible resources that reach those who are most affected. And then third, through our Boston indicators. Is Luke in the room? Oh, shucks. Led by Luke Schuster. We are expanding our research and storytelling to illumine the lived experiences and economic contributions of immigrants in Greater Boston, bringing data to life in ways that form public understanding and policy. I'll give you a couple of numbers that might that you may know intuitively. 18% of the residents in this city are immigrants. That is to say, almost 1 in 5 are immigrants. And they contribute economically, especially in our what we call our main streets, in their businesses. And $8 billion is what the immigrant community pays in local, state, and federal taxes in a single year. So I'm here to impress on all of us the importance of our immigrant families and individuals in Boston. Over the past year, our donor advised fund holders have directed over $17 million to immigrant-serving organizations in our region, and we have provided both grants and technical assistance to strengthen nonprofit capacity. We know we are not alone in this work, and we know it will require all of us, each and every one of us. But before I want to turn the microphone over, I want to say this plainly. The pace of this work, of your work, is real. The pressure is real. The weight of it is real because, and I know that each and every one of you feel it every day, but so is your impact. And I want to thank you for that because what you do every day shapes whether families eat, whether young people thrive, whether elders age with dignity, whether communities feel seen and valued. This is not abstract. It is concrete, it is measurable, and it is moral. It is the right thing to do. All of us at the Boston Foundation are honored to stand with you. Your leadership, your integrity, and your persistence make it possible for us to move forward together, even in this difficult terrain. And this is the time in history when we need to stand for something. I'm reminded of Martin Luther King's remarks in opposition to the Vietnam War, when he said, there comes a time when you have to stand for something. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. And we are at that time where silence is indeed betrayal. And so I want to thank all of you for speaking out, speaking up, and doing all of the good work that you do on behalf of this community. And I want to thank our Massachusetts Nonprofit Network and Mass Inc. Polling for bringing us together today, and express special gratitude Natanya Craig Okindo, Dr. Kara Young, and Tuyet Tran, who will be our panelists. And so now it's my great pleasure to, I was going to introduce, everybody knows you, but to welcome Jim Clockey the CEO of the Nonprofit Network.
Lee, thank you, and good morning, everybody. The room is filling. This is great. It's filling online. The first thing to say is, as Lee did, to acknowledge all the people who made this possible, the great teams at the Boston Foundation and Massing Polling Group and MNN. Thank you all. I want to take just 2 minutes to tell you about two things related to MNN at the start to kind of frame our conversation. The first is that MNN, as the state's nonprofit association, is a resource for all of you. Our job is to help nonprofits grow through advocacy, through communications, through programs, through information. So if there is any way in which we can help you grow, or some days keep your head above water, or navigate all these crazy federal waves we are dealing with, please reach out to anybody on the MNN team. The second thing I want to mention is that we're launching a new MNN advocacy initiative today related to all of these federal challenges. That is the euphemism of the year. They are not challenges, they are bad actions, actions that few of us would have imagined 2 years ago, actions that keep coming, actions that are far too numerous for anybody to keep up with. But when you think about these federal actions, there is an unhappy fact which we need to confront, and that is that some of them are actually legal. Some of the worst federal actions are illegal, and they are being fought in court. But today, it is legal for ICE agents to wear masks in the conduct of their duty. That is legal. The administration claims that it is legal for ICE to break down your house and to break into your car in the pursuit of their duties. That is being litigated in court right now. And so while we fight these battles in court, while the illegal actions are fought by the National Council of Nonprofits and others, while the legally debatable arguments are being fought in court, we need to do something about the legal things that they are doing. What we need to have is a national reform agenda, and that's what MNN's going to start working on today. We will work with partners in Massachusetts and in Washington and around the country in the months ahead to flesh out a federal reform agenda, which is a package of legislative proposals which, if passed, will make it impossible for any future administration to do the excessive things that this administration is doing. The reform agenda won't pass in 3 months. It won't pass this year, but work on it needs to begin now. We need to be talking about these issues today, and we need to be working on them next year so that a year from now, it's illegal for ICE to wear masks. And a year from now, there is no doubt that it is illegal to break into a home by federal agents without a judicial warrant. We welcome your input on all these issues. There's a lot here, it's a lot of work, and it's going to be a big collective effort. So any ideas you have, contact any of us on the MNN staff. We'll be working with the National Council of Nonprofits and with colleagues around the country. As the midterm elections approach, this needs to be an issue on the table. What does a federal reform agenda look like? What are we going to do to make sure that we don't find ourselves in this position 1, 2, 5, 10 years from now? So we welcome your participation. We thank you for your support, and more to come. With that, let me bring up to the podium Rich Parr from the Massing Polling Group. How's that for a setup, Rich? That'll work. Massing, you all know Massing. Massing does great work on a whole number of fronts. And if anybody wants to kibitz about political polls with Rich and me, come to the Parker House at 6 o'clock tonight, 2 stools down at the bar.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Good morning. So let me start by just asking, how many of you took this survey? I'm seeing some hands go up. That's good. None of you have the excuse now to say, I didn't get polled, right? So, but thank you very much for having us here. Jim mentioned Massing, so just to quickly table set, the Massing Polling Group is part of the three-legged stool that is Massing. We have the Massing Policy Center. You might have seen my colleagues out in the hall with some materials from them. We also have Commonwealth Beacon, which is our nonprofit newsroom. So But we are the polling group. We do polling for Mass Inc. and for Commonwealth Beacon. But on this project, we were working with the Boston Foundation and we were working with MNN for the second year in a row, and they were really fantastic partners, so thank you for that. I'm excited to be here today to share the results of what we found. So let's get right into it. So this was a survey of 488 leaders and employees of nonprofit organizations operating in Massachusetts. This is the second year that we've done this survey. Last year we did 523, so very similar sample sizes. This survey was fielded online from January, basically the month of January, January 5th to February 1st. So we hit the ground running right after the New Year's break. We offered this survey in 6 languages: English, Haitian Creole, Mandarin, Portuguese, Spanish, and Vietnamese. This was distributed through organizations. So we had a survey link to an online survey distributed out by MNN to their members, to TBF, to their grantees and other folks, and then we had other partner organizations throughout the state helping us to send that. And thank you to all of you who helped us to distribute this survey. As I mentioned, this project was sponsored by MNN and the Boston Foundation, and they had a lot of input also into writing the questions and helping us to analyze the results as well. And then finally, thank you to all of you who took the survey, who are in the room today, who might be watching online, and took the time to respond. It's really important. Sometimes the results of this survey may not seem super surprising to you, but I think that there's some sort of sense of solidarity in seeing, oh yeah, other people in my field are feeling the same way as I am about some of the things that we're experiencing. I want to go quickly over the demographics of the folks that that took the survey for us. So most of the people, 80% or so of the folks who took this survey were in senior leadership roles in their organization, 48% executive directors, 31% senior leaders. Most of the nonprofits we talked to were pretty small. 57% reported an annual budget of under $2.5 million, and 61% had 25 or fewer employees. So we do have some larger organizations in the mix as well, as you'll see. There's a lot of diversity represented here. 73% of the respondents identify as women, 15% as BIPOC, and 16% as LGBTQ+. And also the organizations themselves are diverse. So 31% report that their staff are majority BIPOC, 18% report that their senior leadership and board are the same. And then finally, and this is really important for some of the slides we're going to get into later, 70% of these organizations receive some form of federal funding, either directly or indirectly, through the state or local government. And that's going to be a really crucial factor as we get into some of the findings that we have. I have a couple slides of key findings. I want to just orient you guys. We're going to do key findings, get into sort of the impacts on populations that nonprofits are serving, what nonprofits are doing to react to that, what impacts nonprofits themselves are feeling, and then finally, we have a couple slides comparing this year's survey to the previous year's survey in terms of predictions versus reality. So the first finding, and this is really, I think Lee hit it on the head with the 2 things he talked about at the beginning here. Immigration and food were 2 of the big issues that we saw in terms of federal policy really impacting nonprofits and the organizations that they serve. As a result, nonprofits are increasing their advocacy and they're expanding their services where they can, although many are having difficulties doing that, and we're going to get into that. Pretty much across the board, from every level, from the U.S. down to the state, down to the population served, people think that things are worse now than they were a year ago. That's one of our key top-line findings that we'll be getting to in a second. All of this is also taking a human toll on organizations. The well-being of the staff that are working in these organizations and trying to serve population is being affected as well, and particularly in BIPOC-led organizations. And nonprofits are also under financial strain. They think that they're in a weaker financial position than they were a year ago, and they think they're going to be in a weaker position a year from now. So as a result, they are seeking more funding, and they're finding some challenges doing that as well. And perhaps not surprisingly, because of that, when we asked them what would be most helpful to them, overwhelmingly they said more help with operating support, more help with revenue, more help with funding in order to complete their missions. So let's get into the charts. So this is I just mentioned this one, but we asked people at the very top of the survey, compared to January 2025, do you think each of the following, the United States, Massachusetts, your organization, and the population that you serve, are better off, worse off, or about the same? And you can see 93%, we've highlighted the worse off here because it really stands out. 93% think that the United States is worse off now than it was a year ago. 72% think Massachusetts is worse off, and 21% think about the same. So there's a little bit more resilience perhaps in Massachusetts. Similarly, 48% think that their organization is worse off, 35% about the same. And then I think this is the really crucial number. 85% think that the populations that they are serving are worse off than they were a year ago. And who are those populations? So we asked people which, and this is the select all that apply question because obviously folks serve different populations. But, really at the top here, people are telling us they're serving low-income individuals, people of color, immigrants, youth, LGBTQ plus community, people facing mental health challenges. There were very few that were general population, serving everybody. Most people have some focus, right? But regardless of what your focus is, everyone is telling us that it is harder to do the work that they are doing now because of the actions of the federal government. 68% saying much harder and another 24% saying a little bit harder. And that really goes across the board up at the top, people who are working with transit riders, people who are working with immigrants, people who are working with the low-income population, people of color. Those are all a little bit higher than the number, but really there's not a lot of variation here. So pretty much across the board in all the populations that are being served by the folks who took this survey, it's a challenge. Now, what are those negative effects? We asked people an open-ended question in the survey. In a few words, how have the populations you serve been affected by changes in federal policy over the past year? And the two things at the top here I think are related to each other. They came up a lot together in a lot of the responses. What we do with these open ends is we read them, we code them into categories, and sometimes you get, people can be coded into multiple categories. But a third of the responses had something to do with immigration, ICE actions, impacts from ICE on the populations that they're serving. 30% talked about fear, stress, or uncertainty. A lot of that, again, connected to immigration, but not exclusively. A quarter mentioned federal funding cuts, regulatory changes, food insecurity, or hunger, as Lee would say, and SNAP benefit cuts. That was one of the really interesting things that came up in this story. Of course, we had the government shutdown in the fall and the loss of the SNAP benefits. We saw a lot of people telling us in the open-ended comments, we had to pivot, we had to change, we had to take on new strategies here, and you'll see that in a couple slides. And then just general sort of the financial strain. This is all happening in a context where the economy is not doing particularly well for the people that these organizations are serving, right? Costs are still going up, and you're having economic pressures at the same time that some of the benefits that these folks are relying on are being cut. So we pulled out some open-ended. I should say that we had some very lengthy and thoughtful responses on this that don't fit onto a slide, but we chose some of the smaller ones, shorter ones, just to kind of for graphic impact. But stressed, divested, starved, I think that put it pretty well. Less funding for their needs, confusing requirements, lack of support. Most directly with the disruption of SNAP benefits and local ICE aid, so immigration and food kind of coming up again. We usually host a naturalization ceremony, but we are afraid that that will not continue. We are a diaper bank, and clients are afraid to come to pick up because of ICE. We heard a lot of that. So not only are people have bigger needs, but they are having more difficulty having those needs met because they're afraid to come and get the services that they are entitled to receive. So we also asked this as sort of, we asked sort of a table question on this, just to kind of cover the big things that had happened in the past year. And consistent with the open ends, we're seeing the loss of SNAP benefits, 74% saying that has had a major negative impact on the populations they serve. And then immigration enforcement at 69% major negative impact. And then there's a few more that are kind of related to that. Changes to federal grants, changes to Medicaid or Mass Health, higher costs due to tariffs. So again, we're seeing this kind of double bind. The economy is getting worse, more difficult for people, and the benefits that that would be helping them are being drawn back. As a result of that, 66% of the nonprofits that we surveyed said that they have seen an increased demand for their services, and that is despite the fact that they're also telling us that some folks are afraid to come out and get those services. Organizations that serve formerly incarcerated individuals, people who are unhoused, domestic violence survivors and veterans were more likely to say that they'd seen an increased demand. They were above that average, that 66% mark. So how are organizations responding to that? Well, this is an interesting chart because it's a little contradictory in some ways. So organizations are kind of at a crossroads. We see 40% of them are telling us that they're increasing the services or programs that they're offering. But 39% are also saying that they're reducing, or these could be different people. Again, this is a select all that apply question. So that's why the numbers add up to more than 100%. We saw in some of the open-ended comments people saying both. Like that earlier in the year they had been cutting back because they didn't have the resources they needed, but then when SNAP benefits were cut, they had to scramble. They started doing food packages and care packages. So some people were increasing what they were doing while they were reducing other things. But you can see that this is a real bind. 26% spending down reserves or their endowment. 40% partnering with other orgs to reduce costs. There's a real cost pressure going on right now with nonprofits. Some of them are thinking about mergers. Some of them are thinking about closing down branches or locations. Small number, but it's still out there. So, and this is the sort of thing where over a number of years you could see that number rise if conditions continue. So we followed up with the 40% who had said that they had increased their services or programming to ask them what they had done. And there's a pretty overwhelming pattern here, right? 44% saying that they did something related to food or SNAP, the SNAP benefit cuts. And then 15% for immigration and legal aid. But food really, again, standing out here in these responses. And here are some of the responses. So again, these are the shorter ones. They're much longer and really thoughtful answers on some of these. But fuel assistance, setting up a farmer's market, legal English workshops, training on how to know your rights, other immigration topics. Some people talked about expanding their geographic reach or making some of the programs that they offer free for people, Spanish language mental health programming, paying people SNAP benefits directly. So there's a lot of scrambling going on. You know, Jim, we were talking, some of the panelists and I, we were all talking before the event and saying that this is sort of the muscle memory of the pandemic coming back for some of these organizations, right? The mutual aid type of things, the things about getting care packages to people, that's happening again, you know, but it's happening because of immigration enforcement and because of the loss of SNAP benefits, not because of the pandemic. So what's happening at nonprofits sort of internally as they are grappling with all of this? Well, the good news is that staffing levels are pretty stable right now. 51% overall are telling us that their staffing levels are about where they were. However, 27% are telling us that their staffing levels are down compared to a year ago. And you can really see that pattern kind of across some of these different demographics here. So this one is the number of employees in the organization. So larger organizations, folks that have 26 or more employees, 34% of them have reduced their staffing. If you receive federal funding, 70% of the organizations in the survey said they receive federal funding. 30% of that 70 are saying that they have reduced their staffing. And then finally, we asked a question about sort of financial health, about how long could you last if your revenue was cut off. Those organizations that could last less than 6 months, 36% of them have reduced their staffing. So they may already be thinking ahead a little bit here and saying, I need to be cutting some costs. Now, as I mentioned, 70% of nonprofits receive some form of federal funding. This is sort of the breakdown. So 64% of them receive grants. That's by far the most common. And then contracts. So 30% are doing contract work or fee-for-service work for the federal government. And then there are other types of revenue. And this is not making up the majority of most organizations' budgets. Only, 15% are saying that it makes up more than half of their budget. But it's still a significant portion for a lot of these nonprofits. And if it's one of your big line items and it goes away, it's going to create strains in other ways. So as a result, what we're seeing, and I have 3 columns here. The first column is actually the last year's survey when we asked people to project forward. And then these 2 columns are sort of what we're hearing now. So in the previous survey, 59% thought that they were going to be in a worse financial position at this point, basically when we did this survey again, a year forward, right? And the good news, I guess, is that number is a little bit lower now. So there is a little bit of resiliency. 25% say that they're kind of about the same position. They're treading water, and 22% do say that they're actually better off. But the plurality here, nearly half, are saying that they're in a weaker position. And then I think crucially, when we ask this cohort now to project out a year, to say, where do you think you're going to be? 41% think that they're going to continue to be weaker. We do see the unsure go up because we're asking people to sort of project forward a little bit. But we're not seeing a lot of clear sailing up ahead here, right? We may have done a little bit better than we thought we were going to do a year ago, but the headwinds are still very much present. So what would help nonprofits with these problems? Well, the number one thing, perhaps not surprisingly, given the financial situation, is more general operating support. 78% identified that as one of their top 3 things. We gave people this list of things and asked them which of these would be your top 3 helps. Followed by capacity building, better policy and regulation, is what Jim was talking about, right? What can we do to change the rules so that nonprofits are a little bit more protected here? And then stronger government partnerships. And we'll see in a second that a lot of nonprofits are already working towards those stronger government partnerships by increasing their advocacy. Okay, I'm gonna go quickly through these last 3. They need more funding. It is harder for them to get more funding. You can see here that the majority or the plurality are telling us that each of these sources of government funding has become harder for them. State government funding, grants from foundations, grants from corporations are all more challenging now. At the same time, nonprofits are dealing with some added costs. 22% have added security. You can see that that's particularly the case as you get kind of into the middle of the budget range here. So the bigger nonprofits may have already had some security, but it's those ones in that 750,000 up to under 10 million range that are reporting higher levels of security. Advocacy is on the rise, and you can see that this is really a factor with the bigger nonprofits in the survey, but everyone, 48% are engaging more with their government officials, 47% are increasing their participation in coalitions. And again, the bigger you get, the more active you are on these particular fronts. As I mentioned in the key findings, there are serious impacts on the people who work at nonprofits. People who work in nonprofits are often from the same communities that they are serving and are feeling a lot of the same fear, uncertainty, anxiety. We're seeing that across the board with all nonprofits. 54% are saying that what's been going on at the federal level has had a major negative impact on their staff. Among BIPOC-led organizations, and we define that as somebody who, more than half of the organization's senior leadership is BIPOC. 73% of them are saying that they have had a major negative impact. We also asked about DEI, changes to DEI emphasis. Obviously, this is a big thing coming from the federal government. The good news, I think, is that there really hasn't been a big change. 58% say that they haven't really changed their approach to DEI despite the pressures from the federal government. 22% have put more emphasis on it, 15% have put less. I will note that the bigger organizations, I think, are feeling a little bit more of a strain on this, and 30% of the largest organizations by budget have put less emphasis on DEI. So finally, these are my last 2 slides. We just want to compare back to that prior survey that we got to do a year ago, kind of where did people think that we were going to be at this point versus where we are now. And there's a lot of consistency here. So in 2025, people, 64% expected to see an increased demand for their services. We're now seeing almost exactly the same number saying that that has in fact happened. 92% in that 2025 survey thought that Massachusetts was going to be worse off. It's 72% here, 21% thought that Massachusetts has kind of weathered the storm, so maybe a little bit more resilience. I think that's a good story. 92% thought their population served would be worse off, 85% very similar. And then finally, 91% in 2025, looking forward, thought it would be harder to carry out their mission, a nearly identical 93%. So just to put that in closing, kind of the prediction versus reality. People in the previous survey thought the Trump administration was going to be bad for Massachusetts, for nonprofits, for the population served. That is coming through in our data again. They predicted increased demand. We're seeing that. They predicted that the loss of federal funding was going to hurt people. That is definitely happening, particularly in the area of SNAP benefits in this survey. also the loss of federal funding is having these ripple effects through the funding ecosystem. And that is really coming through in terms of the challenges people are talking about with funding. So with that, thank you very much. I'll be around later if anybody wants to chat.
Rich, thank you so much. As we bring the panelists up, I will add 2 quick footnotes to Rich. I guess the silver lining here is that our predictions were accurate, right? I mean, our predictions were things would get worse, and they have got, so our predictions are accurate. We would prefer the reverse. The second, the slide about financial conditions. We actually ask that question fairly frequently. Most years we ask that question in member surveys. And most years nonprofits say our finances today are better than they were a year ago. So the finding that half say they are worse is a departure. It is a change. It is a real effect of what's going on out there. So let's bring up our panel, and we will hear from them, and then we'll have a conversation, and then we'll open up for audience questions in the latter part of it. We have 3 terrific leaders and partners of MNNs with us. Tuyet Tran is the Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Coalition of Central Massachusetts, based in Worcester. Natanya Craig-Oquendo is the Executive Director of the Boston Women's Fund here in Boston. And Carrie Young Ponder is the Vice President of Knowledge, Impact, and Strategy at the National Council of Nonprofits in Washington, D.C. And so to get us started, I'm going to ask each of them to tell us just a little bit, maybe give one example of what something your organization is doing now, today, to deal with this moment, in this moment, so different than 18 months ago. Tuyet.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm not sure where to start, to be truthful. We're doing our best. So I came here as a refugee, and my staff are mostly immigrants and refugees, and we work with immigrants and refugees. And so I will be honest, I was raised by religious people, so I can't really swear, but every morning I wake up and I see OMG, and then it's intermittently replaced with WTF. Okay, so, but you know, I think part of it is really the challenge between how do I make sure that we take care of people, take care of the team, and take care of myself. And I don't have an answer, but I think part of it is really being honest and upfront about the challenges that we're facing, and talk to each other about it, and try to say, hey, this is what we need, and it's okay to take a moment to reflect on these things. It's okay to feel angry. It's okay to feel anxious. And it's okay to also acknowledge that I need time to reflect, because it's also about re-experiencing trauma. So a lot of that is not just for me to discuss within myself, but with the team and with other people.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Natanya.
Thank you, Tuet. So the Boston Women's Fund is an intermediary. So we support frontline leaders, mostly really small organizations, under $500,000. So there's a couple of things that we've done. The first was financial, y'all. Last year, our board kind of knew what was coming down the pike, and so we're taking 10% out of our endowment this year, which is different than other years where we were a little bit more conservative. That's a one-time, but I think that it's us getting off our daffs. I think the other thing is relational, to be honest. We pulled down the curtain. We started to have real conversations with our grantee partners about what they were going through, what we were feeling, what our staff was going through. And we realized that there was actually a lot of the same fear, a lot of the same questions, a lot of the same challenges. And that really helped us show up better as a funder, to be really honest. I could hold a conversation with you, Tuet, because I have a different lived experience, and I know that I should be showing up differently for you now. And so that feels very important to us at the Boston Women's Fund. So I would say both financially, we took some risks that we haven't in the past, and we are also working on our personal relationships with our grantee partners to understand them better so that we can show up better for them.
Erin.
Thank you so much. The National Council of Nonprofits' mission is to champion, inform, and connect organizations, to protect and advance the sector, and to support nonprofit organizations across the country doing the critical work that you all are doing every day in all of your communities. And I want to echo what we heard here in the polling. We're seeing that and we are hearing that on the national level across the country. It's very similar to what you're seeing here in Massachusetts. And I also want to share that what we're seeing is the sector really mobilizing to work in new and profound ways, to be more connected, to be more unified. And we have really been able to stave off the worst of the worst harms that could have been, despite feeling that we're worse off today. And a couple of examples of how we've done that at the National Council of Nonprofits include litigation. This is new for us, but since January of 2025, we have sued the current administration 4 times. We have achieved 2 nationwide preliminary injunctions to ensure that funding didn't stop, but continued to flow to all of your communities. And we were able to protect SNAP benefits, releasing them to communities during the last government shutdown. We also launched a campaign to counter negative stereotypes and messages about the nonprofit sector through a paid media campaign called Nonprofits Get It Done. And you can find this beautiful campaign at nonprofitsgetitdone.org. And this is a campaign that was informed by our own polling. We did a nationwide poll overrepresenting for Republican voters across the nation to understand people's views right now at this moment about nonprofits. And what we found was that 75% of Republican voters thought that nonprofits should be investigated, and 75% of Republican voters thought that nonprofits should be defunded. So we are in a very different position than we were 5 or 10 years ago, when the case for nonprofits being champions for the public good is now in question. And so we are working with a communications firm to try to counter those narratives, really believing that if we can get people back on board for the case that nonprofits are the ones that are doing the critical work, showing up every day to serve communities in need, then we'll be in a much better position to do the advocacy work and the actual community work that we're all already doing.
Thank you. You know, when Lee Pelton was talking at the beginning, he talked very concretely about the services provided, the needs, the food, the tangible assistance. And as one of many partners in the poll Kara talked about, one of the things that shone through was that particular message, nonprofits are doing real things on the ground, delivering real services, that message resonates. It resonates across the country. And so we know it in this room, but as we're trying to build support for our work, as we're trying to make even more friends and allies, telling that basic story, the basic real services delivered, the basic needs that are being met, that's one of our greatest assets. For anybody, were there was there anything in the poll that surprised you? No. Next question. Or anything you want to shine a light on?
Well, I think the piece around how, I think most of us think that we're worse off, but that there's some indication that we continue to do what we do, right, in terms of the amount of work, the funding, and I keep thinking about, sort of our roles have, a dollar used to be $50 worth of work. Now it's $100 worth of work. What it means is that for us as a team, as people, we are stretching sort of our time in a row, if you will, a lot more. It's double in terms of what we do. And so that's why it looks like we're still doing a lot, because we are doing a lot. And so it comes down to how much can you stretch, your time, your efforts, your dollars, without it eventually impacting everyone personally in a way that is that will come out, I think, in terms of one's mental health, right? So that's what I think, that's a part of the data that was interesting to me. But in reality, that's what we're doing. Your comment about Republicans, I think from the perspective of small, from community, I think what people are realizing is that it's impacting everyone. You know, you need food. It's not about Republican, Democrat, Independent, whatever it is your political stance is. It's about you need food, your family need food, and I think the more we're able to tell that story, the more we do that. I think it's just about human beings, and the more we get those stories to that data, I think people see it not just as a Republican and Democrat thing. It's about your community, people who are homeless, who constantly, you know, who need food, and hunger is real, you know. So.
No, nothing surprised me. Thank you for asking, though. I think what came up for me, though, was how we have to do a better job in philanthropy listening to our leaders. A year ago, we took this survey, and it's some of the data is very shockingly the same. Yep. And I can't help but to think about, what if a year ago we sat together knowing all of this was coming down the pipelines, and I'm talking about philanthropy, nonprofit partners, community leaders, to really decide how Boston is going to meet this moment. And I'm saying this from a place also of like, where I beat myself up every day because I'm like, well, why didn't you do it, right? Like, so, and that is because I can understand that 40% of leaders increasing services and then decreasing them. I understand because every day it looks different, doesn't it? Every day it looks different. Yeah. So it's a really hard freaking question to answer. Because one day you might be waking up and you're thinking, I'm gonna go to all of these meetings, I know what I'm supposed to do, but you get a call from a leader who is in desperate need of your help right now. And this is a time, y'all, that we've just never been in. And the slowness in which philanthropy can sometimes respond, I think is gonna be detrimental to greater Boston if we don't figure out how our marriage as sectors, right? I think of philanthropy and nonprofit as a marriage, and right now we are separated because our nonprofits are on the ground, they are doing the things, they are continuing to do the things. You know why they don't? I think about this with grassroots organizations all the time, and someone reminded me, they never go away, they always pivot, y'all. They always pivot because they don't have a choice. But we do. We sit in these seats, we sit at these tables, we sit on these panels, and we have choices. So I guess for me, nothing surprised me except for the fact that I think there could be much better organizing around funders, nonprofits, community leaders in residence.
I love it, Dr. Carr.
Yeah, thank you so much for what you both shared. I agree, nothing surprised me. And also, I want to just affirm that we are seeing similar messages across the country. There's now data coming from the Urban Institute, the Center for Philanthropy, the Johnson Center for Foundations, that is showing that people are feeling worse off, that people are having more needs, increased needs, and nonprofits have less resources and less staff to meet those needs. And the good news story here is that we are seeing increased collaboration. And that was incredible to be able to see in those data, that people are shifting because we have to, that we're finding new ways to work together, that we're asking the hard questions, that we're trying to figure out what we can do given the resources we have, given the staff that we have. The other thing that I wanted to say to just address what you both said is that I think that this is this incredible moment, right? I was thinking this morning that 2025 was this year of tremendous consequences, but let's face it, 2026 has been too. Mm-hmm. It's not like the harm has stopped.
That's right.
And one of the things that your poll showed is that it's a stratified effect. This is not impacting everyone equally. It's not impacting all areas of work and subsectors equally. It does seem to be affecting most nonprofits, but those who are serving people of color, immigrants, who are working on women's rights, who are working on LGBTQIA rights, those organizations are seeing an increased impact, an increased psychological effect, and the chilling effect of seeing that nonprofits are being investigated, that funding is being pulled for these critical services. So this is not impacting everyone equally, and I think that's an important part of your data to raise up and to really grapple with. What does that mean, and how can we step forward even more to support the organizations that are being hit the hardest?
Let me look back to a point in time you just made, and I'm going to reference the pandemic because not everything is repeating itself, but there are some parallels. We saw the parallels, right? 5 years ago, everybody moved into the food and security business. A difference is that 5 years ago, there were big new rivers of federal funding. Who remembers PPP loans?
Of course.
There is none of that now, which is why you're seeing this financial pressure. Another dynamic that happened in the pandemic was that foundations became much more flexible, moved quickly, moved more funds into general operating, and that was very much appreciated, and that made a real difference for nonprofits. We're 5 years later. I'd be interested in everybody's sense, are things still in that position? Has the pendulum swung back? What lessons do we take as we're trying to get closer to the kind of the ideal that Tanya held out?
Jim, I love when you call me Tanya. That's what my family calls me. It makes me feel like I'm at home, and she's at home. So thank you for that. Y'all want to go?
I was like, why didn't you tell me that, Tanya? I'm bilingual, so it's easier to just say Tanya.
Do it. I got it. I'll get it somewhere. So I think that I actually came to a meeting here this summer, and we talked about, and thank you, the Boston Foundation for even convening that meeting, was with large and small foundations to talk about kind of meeting this moment. And what came up in that conversation is that this is different, right? When we were dealing with the virus, we did have federal support. We also saw that there was going to be an end game. And we're not seeing that, right? The attacks are really, really different. Don't get me wrong, y'all. The same people and communities are being impacted, but the attacks are very different. And so what we're hearing, what we saw, is that that philanthropy is retreating, that we're not moving as fast as our partners are asking us to, that some of us are scared. This is the first time in my career, y'all, that I've ever received calls calling me a black bee, right? I never thought that I would be running an organization called the Boston Women's Fund, and that would be a threat to America. That does something to our psyches, y'all, to philanthropy psyche, to the nonprofit psyche. So I think there is a slight chill effect happening in the philanthropic sector. I want to be honest about that. I think some of us are scared. I think some of us are unsure. I think some of us don't know exactly how to move or where the biggest problems are. But I actually think that is the opportunity to redesign a system that has never worked for any of us. It hasn't really worked for donors. It hasn't really worked for funders. And it damn sure has not worked for our grassroots leaders or our nonprofit partners. We know this for sure. They've been telling us for years, y'all. So for me, things have changed, but too much has stayed the same, Jim, if I'm being honest.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to say I felt that in my stomach for you. And just want to take a moment and pause and say that happened to you. And the brave to us, and the bravery that it takes to say, okay, I'm going to keep showing up for this work makes this different than the pandemic from the beginning. And I also want to say this is different from the pandemic because from a federal level, when we see this suite of attacks on the nonprofit sectors, the executive orders, the threats on nonprofit nonpartisanship, the criminal and civil investigations into nonprofits, the attempts to strip nonprofits of their tax-exempt status, the list goes on. When we zoom back and look at the narrative and the thread that connects all of these actions, it's that from a federal level, there's a discourse that the nonprofit sector is an enemy to be fought and to be destroyed. And that makes this fundamentally different than the pandemic, when we saw ourselves as connected and in solidarity against a common enemy, this virus, right? It was a moment for us to open and to collaborate, instead of having this situation where, because of the threats being so real and so targeted, it creates a chilling effect and a real fear for people's safety in this moment.
I think Kara's perspective on this is unique because it is national and because this picture is worse than most other parts of the country. We know, you see it every day, I hear about it from colleagues in other states, but whatever we here in Massachusetts are hearing about and experiencing, unfortunately, it's worse in other places, just so people have a sense of that.
But I think it's still real, I think, for me, and I think in my role, like you both mentioned, I shifted from, let's go in and help people, today, to, okay, am I safe? Are staff safe? My staff from Afghanistan, is she safe? Are we safe? Did we just put up, a form that says it's a private space that, are we training people to look at the camera to see if there are people that they shouldn't let into the office? And then, we've gone from a class full of people, we have 6 ESL classes, to now 4 because 2 of them were at night, and we went from 20 people to 2 people. So then now we have to think about, okay, and safety is real, right? Because people, even though the bus is free, people are afraid to stand outside and get attacked, right? And then of course you have to deal with the snow and all of that too. So just to add that to the mix, so I've had to pivot and think about how do we do the good work that we do and stay safe. And your comment about funders, I would love to see more funders who come to us and say, what do you need? Yes. And how can we support you? How can we write a bigger check?
Yes, yes. How can we fundraise together?
Yes.
Like, how can I give you a warm relationship? 100%.
Yes. Versus, I always say the $5,000 that we get, the paperwork is almost equal to the $50,000, and it continues, right? It's a huge problem.
And I just want to say, Boston Women's Fund has done some work on our processes, y'all. So if you need help thinking about literally how you can, release some of that burden off of our leaders, we would love to talk to you. It does not have to be that way. You can capture the same data without burdening our leaders.
Without, Tanya, without putting you on the spot too much, you mentioned before the 10% payout.
And now in the media.
Yes. How did those conversations go internally? I think everybody is delighted to hear about that, and people would like, frankly, for that to happen more. But it's a big question. So how did it go, and what advice would you have?
Well, first of all, hats off to the board, right? Like that it actually started with their leadership, not mine, with thinking about, as we move into this next year, knowing we also raise money, y'all, to then get money out of the door, where we see ourselves as a bridge between community and philanthropy. And so every year we're starting off at starting a new fiscal year, raising money. And what we knew from what we were hearing in our conversations back in 2025 is that we needed more resources. We had to have more resources go out, and we couldn't continue to sit on our own endowment and not make a move, including talking to our donors about what risk we were willing to take in this moment, how we wanted to show up, and how we wanted to encourage them to also show up with us. So the conversation really started with the board bringing it to me, saying, is this a time for us to look at our endowment? I will say our endowment did double, and so this was an incredible opportunity for us, and very, very grateful to the Rattling Corner Fund for that. But it was it wasn't a hard conversation in terms of where our values are. I think the board was very clear about that. It was a hard conversation in terms of what does this mean for the long term for the Boston Women's Fund, to be honest.
Yeah,
But right now, that's not what we're thinking about. We're thinking about what does it mean for our grantee partners.
that's great. Let me ask any or all of you to share, so in moments of crisis and challenge, history is clear. People can be creative and resilient and graceful and inspirational. Share some stories about that. People you see doing amazing things. People you see coming up with new ways to deal with this unprecedented set of threats.
I'm privileged in seeing that every day. With my staff or my team, people who are dealing with their own situations and yet step up every day. There's a community refrigerator downstairs, and we, have, as part of the work that we do is, the staff are always thinking about how do we make sure that particular refrigerator is filled. And also, we have a lot of individuals who are homeless. Right now, unfortunately, older adults. And so there's a lot of talk about how do we make sure that we reach out to these individuals that are around our building and work with others. That's in addition to all the other things that we do, right? So, and when people don't show up for ESL, what do? How do we reach out and ask them what's going on, and how do we shovel out our van, right, which is still stuck in the snow? So if anyone
Not
wants
for
to come
long.
in, right? So there's a lot of that. There's constant conversation about how do we do things, how do we solve problems, even in the midst of everything else, and everyone is dealing with their own situation at home. I have staff who come in and say, "Oh, I'm not sure what's going to happen with my family. We just came here 3 years ago," and other family members who, have come in and said, my family member was taken by ICE. So that's the constant thing going on, but we haven't stopped talking about how do we all help our neighbors.
Thank you.
I have so many examples, y'all. I'm going to go through them really quick. So I want to shout out Latino Legacy Fund. I'm just thinking about what Javi did to get $100K out of the door and then to get that into the hands of people who lost their safety net. I want to talk about the Equality Fund and Scott and just creating spaces for queer people just to be together, especially in a time when policies are trying to write them out. I want to talk a little bit about Abba, who is a dear friend of mine. Yesterday, she sent me a text right as I was writing my notes for this, and she said, "Girl, I am sitting in the middle of 2 Zooms that I am talking on, by the way. I am responding to your email, and I am exhausted and I am burnt out." And I literally wanted to cry. And what I want to say is that Abba's situation is not unique. And it is systemic. And I think as we start to look at systemic issues and start to look at burnout as systemic issues, I think we would be better off as a sector. So my shout out. And shout out to Boston Women's Fund for being. But I wanted to make sure y'all knew there's so much dope work going on out there.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
That's a great segue into what I was going to say.
Yes.
I am so inspired by you
Same.
two.
Same.
I'm so inspired by everyone here and the work you're all doing. I have been really inspired by the ways that communities have stepped up around immigration enforcement, coming into their neighborhoods and coming to their doors. We've seen again and again through that the way that community-based, community-centered, community-powered movements are really important and strong and the way to move forward. And then I would say I've been inspired to see an increased desire to talk about burnout, to talk about well-being as not a nice to have, but critical to our ability to survive and thrive through this, which I've seen a lot of our partners think about.
Thank you all so much. We're going to shift to audience questions, but let me just acknowledge what you're sharing and the depth of it and the reality of it and the perspective it brings all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tia.
There are folks with microphones in different parts of the room, so if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll try. We'd like to get to as many people as possible, so if you can ask short questions, we'll try to give you short answers and cover as much as we can. Why don't we start up here?
Hi, Julio Ricardo Varela. Quick question. Have you had experience of federal agencies targeting you, like the IRS, or is that just a general, we've been hearing stories that nonprofits it's like, here's a tax letter that just came out of nowhere, and I'm just curious if you've heard any stories or have experienced it.
Yeah.
I can take that.
Yeah.
We have heard stories across the country of this happening, unfortunately, and we're trying our best to protect those who are experiencing that. But yeah, that is a reality of our time.
I was just going to add, even though hopefully not targeted, but I think there's conversations that I've had with the board and different people around to say, you want to be thoughtful about what you're presenting and what you're writing, because there is that fear that you would end up getting targeted, and that's real. So that type of fear is going around in terms of nonprofits.
Some of us, unfortunately, have women in our name, so we can't really do anything about that. But yes, it is. I would say I haven't heard that here yet in Greater Boston, at least not with our smaller organizations. Yeah. Well, I think we want to hear about it as philanthropy. Yeah.
Ed.
Thank you very much. I want to thank the Mass Nonprofit, Boston Foundation, all of you for being here at Mass Inc. I'm Edward Scatino. I represent the Animal Rescue League of Boston. We've been in Boston for 127 years. I think it's very important that pets are part of the conversation. Human health, animal health is interlinked. Foundations and other organizations, animals are always out of the buckets of giving. And we have found through our community partnerships, keeping pets in homes, when people are disappearing off the streets, the pets are left in their house. People are hungry, pets are hungry, people are sacrificing for themselves because they need to take care of their pets. I just ask that pets are in the conversation and understanding the link of human health and animal health. People struggle, pets are struggling, and I just think being part of that conversation is really important for a healthy city and healthy community. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Let's go over here.
Yeah, please.
Yes, in the front. There's a microphone coming.
I was going to shout. Okay.
That's right.
Dr. Ponder, you mentioned the well-being aspect, so I want to talk about that. And Jim, you can answer this question as well. But what are the strategies that you are taking and the practical tactics that you are implementing to support your staff who are also feeling that burnout?
Thank you for that question. It's something we think about a lot at the National Council of Nonprofits. And I'll just start by saying that well-being and wellness issues are systemic. Burnout is systemic, and it's really hard or challenging to even bring that in when we're also, and hold that alongside organizations have less funding to meet more needs with less staff and stretching themselves thin. It feels almost like offensive to be like, well, you should care about your well-being, right? But I think this first step is to acknowledge that there is a problem, and we have research to back that up, that staff are feeling chronically overworked, and burnout is something that people are dealing with across the sector. And then I think the tools are having those conversations internally with your organizations to figure out the strategies to deal with burnout. What do organizations and staff need? And it's so specific to organization, from organization to organization, around the kinds of pauses or resources that we can give to staff members at nonprofits to inch our way towards a sector that is well and not feeling like we have to sacrifice ourselves for the work. So I think it's a long-term conversation. And then there's short-term strategies that we can implement along the way.
I have some short-term strategies that we employ at the Boston Women's. The first thing is, as soon as this administration changed over, there was a memo that went out to staff that if you don't feel safe, you don't come in, that there's not a question about it. That was first and foremost. The second was, if you are doing any kind of like if you are part of any rallies or any of that, please give us your contact information because we want to be a part of making sure you're safe and okay. Unlimited PTO with no questions asked. We shut down twice a year. So those who don't take the unlimited PTO, even though we encourage them to. But I think what's most important about probably what we've done is we've asked people to bring their full selves. Do not compartmentalize yourself for this work. I mean, we are all here because we are people of the heart. At least I think so, right? I learned here in this office that philanthropy is called the love of humanity. And so for me, it is about putting humanity first. It is about thinking about this moment when their war breaks out in Iran, that we are sitting in a Zoom talking about it. We're not gonna push past it as if it didn't happen, right? It is taking time to pause internally. It is also me being really vulnerable and saying, I'm fucking scared. Oops, sorry.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Shocking.
Always happens. I try so hard. We were so close, y'all. We were so close. But it's also in my own vulnerability, right? In this moment, and saying like, yeah, some days I feel brazen and emboldened, and other days I feel burnt out, tired, and very, very afraid. And I think that those conversations have to continue to happen. Our missions need to face inward. They cannot just face outward.
See it?
I think you need to go to confession.
My husband would be, yeah, he would be right on. He'd be like, tonight. I know it's Lent. I apologize.
We're good. Yes. We're good.
God has already forgiven me. We just got a moment.
OMG.
WTF.
You know, I think for me it's important to just be okay with being vulnerable.
That's it.
In front of people and to acknowledge on a regular basis, you know, I feel lost too, and I am scared. And then also allowing space for people to say the same thing and problem solve together. But the other thing that I employ a lot is really food. So constantly, here's my credit card, let's go get some noodles, you know. And so we eat together a lot. Also, we bought a karaoke machine.
Yeah.
And I have to be honest with you. I'm sorry that I did. For the people that love singing really loudly and in a building that I've gotten some complaints. I'm like, I'm sorry, we'll get some lessons in. but I think, and just being humorous, and I think for me, just finding family and friends who you can just be real with, and you know, use the actual F word a lot, not in front of the camera. But exactly.
Kara, talk for a minute about the Thrive grants.
Sure. Yeah, so at the National Council of Nonprofits, we have launched a grant program called Thrive. And Thrive is a flexible grant program based in trust-based philanthropy, where it's available to all of our network members with very, very small requirements for applications. I think we ask for a paragraph, and you can get money to do well-being programming for your staff. And so we've had great success with that, and it's gone a long way in allowing the members of our network to feel supported and to launch those programs that they might not have had funding to launch. Because let's face it, like if you have limited funding, then well-being is going to be the thing that gets cut first. And so this is a great call to grant makers. There's a report on our website about the effect of the Thrive grants if you want evidence to support these claims that it works and it's important. And not only that it works and it's important, but that it actually helps to strengthen the mission and the work if people feel supported in their well-being.
Thank you. We at MNN are happy customers of the Thrive program. Second round coming.
Yes.
Other questions over here? Yes, and then we'll go here.
Hi, thanks. Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. I'm Gina McDonald. I'm with BDO's Nonprofit and Grantmaker Advisory Team, and we do a lot of capacity building around financial management for nonprofits. So in the survey, it was interesting that the second item, right after operating support that folks were in need of was capacity building. So I'm wondering what that means to you all. What does capacity building mean?
I can take this first. So in January of 2025, when it was clear that the national landscape was shifting, we came up with a plan together to ensure that we could both meet the moment and also have our eyes on the prize, because it became clear that if we did not have a capacity building component to our work that we were investing in every day, that we could all work on the meeting the moment solely, all of our time, right? Because it's so dire. And so that's actually the team that I oversee, is the one that's doing capacity building. To me, capacity building means creating the resources that allow nonprofits to continue to meet their missions through this time together and as long as it takes to get to the other side. But also, if we do capacity building right, I think it also means that we end strengthened at the end of this and not decimated. And that takes both more resources for people to continue to build the programs and build out the programs that they already have in place to help meet community needs. But I think it also means working in new ways, creating different tables where we can have conversations with one another about how we're doing, about what we're doing, and about what we need to do it better, and about thinking about across the table with other capacity building organizations to figure out new creative strategies to help us all meet our missions and meet community needs.
Anybody else?
I feel like that was a well-rounded answer.
Okay.
The woman in the purplish scarf, thank you.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Bartlett-Raw with the Boston Debate League. Thank you so much. One thing we haven't talked about at all today is the corporate sector and corporate support, and particularly thinking about the difference between 2020 and today. I'm just curious to hear what thoughts you would have to add about how the corporate sector is supporting or not in this moment.
I'll refrain.
Oh, okay. I was looking to you.
I think it's heartbreaking, honestly. I think that I call it whiplash a little bit, right? To see how quickly DEI got rolled back, to see that values we believed in have shifted or changed or have been taken away or erased off of websites, to see that the communities that they were lifting up a couple of years ago and really supporting, I thought, in a meaningful way, kind of have to be dealt with differently now. And I understand that. I understand the nuance. I think where I get stuck, if I'm being honest, is in the values. I understand that operations always have to change. I understand that strategy has to change. I think what I'm hearing and what I'll just say feels hurtful is that I think this is a time, regardless if you are for capitalism or not for it, that humans are suffering. And for me, that's a value. We're in the middle of a war against humanity, literally. And for me, I would love to see, work with, talk with, better understand how corporate could work with philanthropy and nonprofits differently, because I think we're all a little hurt.
One footnote on that, we worry all the time about what's happening with funding, where's the economy going, and when there's these economic kind of storm clouds or sudden tornadoes in the form of tariffs, you wonder what that's going to do to the ability of donors, corporate and otherwise, to contribute. And I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there on that front.
Yeah,
I wish it wasn't the case, but I think it's a reality. I think one of the reasons you saw in the slides, people are trying to do more, people are having more difficulty getting funding. There's more competition for funding because some funding pools are shrinking. And so we're all in this scorpion bowl together, to use a harsh metaphor. But we all need to help each other get through it. We're going to wrap the panel discussion now. but I can't say enough how grateful we are to the three of you for doing such a great job today. Thank you so much. Last role is to introduce Lee Hanshu of the Boston Foundation. We'll just stay here.
All right. Thank you so much, Kara, Natanya, Tuyet, Jim, and all of our presenters, Dr. Pelton and Rich. It was a true privilege to be able to hear from you today. Please join me in another round of applause for our panel and speakers. Good morning. My name is Lee Hanshu, Senior Program Officer for Sector Infrastructure here at the Boston Foundation, and I'm here to wrap us up with some important thank yous and some next steps. But before I do, I'll just share that as an audience member, being able to walk away from any panel, in this case, not just more informed, but maybe tested, fired up, and even feeling some discomfort, I'd argue that's a success. When we walk away not fully settled, things aren't buttoned up and tied up with a bow. Those are the conditions that can sprout really that renewed possibility that a lot of our speakers spoke about today, if we decide to embrace it. So thank you for challenging us. I really appreciate that. And in a local and global context, that is deadly serious, particularly for our most impacted neighbors. I'm grateful that the door to possibility was cracked open a little wider today. And I really hope it creates space for renewed action and hopefully building increased connection and solidarity across our sector and roles. And with that, I would love to extend some gratitude to the many people who partnered on the survey and today's event. Please hold your applause. I'm going to give some shout outs here. The Mass Nonprofit Network team, Jess Sini, Claire Ladd, Molly McCraig, and Megan Murphy. The Mass Inc. Polling Group team members, Rich Parr, Olivia Wine, and Steve Cozella. My TVF colleagues across several departments, a special nod to Ted McEnroe, Nicolette Capiello-Wheeler, Sandy Kendall, Keith Mahoney, Sam Chambers, Dr. Yamanda Wright, Lee Gaspar, Dina Groutzis, Michelle Hinkle, Mimi Huckins, Jordan Nume, Hannah Stahl, Yarrow Jones, and Vanessa Tran. I'm not going to stop. A big thank you to our partners at Interpreter Now for providing ASL services today, Mama Anna's for the wonderful food, and our partners at a Better Resolution for the streaming and production. And I'll really close with a special note of gratitude to the over 30 partners, really crucial partners across the state, community foundations, United Ways, fiscal sponsors, intermediaries, nonprofit coalitions who shared the survey with their local nonprofit communities, ensuring we could get a broad response. So, and closing with just immense gratitude for all of you for taking the time to attend today in person and online. The Zip It light is officially flashing, so please keep a lookout for an email with in the coming week with the event recording, collateral, and other resources. But thank you. Please stay and connect, and thank you again for coming.